Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third and final day of the 2022 online thematic seminar on management challenges of internationally designated areas, organized by the Korean National Commission for UNESCO, Yeoncheon-gun District, and MAP National Committee of the Republic of Korea, supported by the Korean Ministry of Environment and the Korea National Park Service. I am Hyun-Suk Seo, the Director of the Sciences and Youth Division at the Korean National Commission for UNESCO. It is my great honor to welcome you all to this seminar, and I also would like to express my sincere thanks to all of you for joining us today from all over the world. For your information, today's session will be finished 20 minutes longer at 6:20 in the afternoon in Seoul time. We'll now begin the third day of the seminar. Today, we have a keynote speech and 3 case presentations on management of IDAs and involvement of the local community. This will be followed by a panel discussion among all speakers at the end. If you have any questions during the seminar, please leave a comment in the Zoom chat and we will gladly deal with it at the end of the seminar. Now, I would like to introduce Professor Dennis Margaret Matthias, our keynote speaker today. Dr. Matthias is a professor at the Biosphere Reserves Institute of the Eberswalde University for Sustainable Development in Germany. She specialized in ecosystem-based transformation management in UNESCO Biosphere Reserves. Prior to joining Biosphere Reserves Institute, Professor Matthias held research and postdoctoral position in projects focusing on grasslands sustainability, climate change adaptation, and indigenous community forestry, and she graduated from the University of Bonn with a PhD in agricultural sciences. She is also currently one of the lead authors of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, thematic assessment on the interlinkages among biodiversity, water, food, and health. Please give her a very warm welcome. Professor Matthias, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. So very much looking forward to speaking to you today and as well as introducing the 3 case studies later on. So for today, my keynote speech will be on the management of internationally designated areas and the involvement of the local community. Before that, I would like to greet all of you from the Elbe-Brandenburg River Landscape Biosphere Reserve here in Germany, where we are currently holding a summer school together with partners from South Africa and Canada. And we have around 20 students from all over the world. So this is a quick view of what the Elbe-Brandenburg River landscape is. So it's like a bird's eye view from the top of a watchtower. And the watchtower is this one, this concrete big tower that you see where you can climb up. So that's where I took the photo and I climbed up all of these stairs. And this watchtower is actually sort of a relic from the Eastern Germany part of Germany right after the Second World War, when Germany was divided into different zones. And actually, this is quite interesting because when I went up this watchtower, you can also see everyone is enjoying, everyone is using this as a tourist stop when you do some bike tours. But it is quite important in our discussion today. So what is with this watchtower? For us who didn't grow up here, who are tourists, this watchtower is something to see like, oh wow, it gives us an idea of the history, where border guards used to stay in this watchtower and take a look like, okay, are there people trying to escape to West Germany? And then there are also instances that those who are escaping also get shot and die along the way to escaping to the other part of Germany. And so this part of Germany, as you can see from this article, shows that it used to be a death zone, which has been developed to a nature reserve. And it even received some awards. As you can see in this article, the German Federal Environment Foundation honored the so-called Green Belt Conservation Project. And we even mentioned how this has parallels with South Africa and South Korea. And one of our case studies later, which will be given by Dr. Neil Moores, will talk about one of the biosphere reserves in South Korea, which has parallelisms with this area of Germany. However, for us, what we found out is that this watchtower, it may be interesting to us as tourists or as outsiders, but when we discussed with the local communities here, it's a very painful reminder of the past. And so there's one member who talked to us during this time that we're here, who said that he never went up that watchtower because it was very painful for him. And if it were up to him, he would actually tear it down. So then we get sort of an idea of how there are differences in terms of the culture of remembrance within the biosphere reserve, and especially with those who grew up here, experienced the time when it was still part of East Germany, and compared to how those of us who are, for example, pushing for biosphere reserves, pushing for a nature reserve in this area, where, of course, we say that during that time where the two parts of Germany were divided, there was also an opportunity for biodiversity to have a lot of opportunity to thrive, because there, along the border, there was not much happening. There was not much human activity to actually disturb them. And so biosphere reserves, we say, are living sustainability laboratories. And here we have two biosphere reserves where you don't only have local communities living there, but you also have other tourists. So again, we see different perspectives, tourists as well as local communities. And we know that the biosphere reserves have three main functions. So we say that in a mnemonic type of way. First would be letter C, second would be E, and the third would be L. So it's like cell. First would be the conservation of biodiversity and cultural diversity. Second is economic development that is socio-culturally and environmentally sustainable. And lastly, we have the logistics support underpinning development through research, monitoring, education, and training. So I'd like to focus on number 2, which is economic development. That is socio-culturally and environmentally sustainable. And, you know, there is a lot to unpack here. When we discuss this with the students, their first thought was like, what is development? And especially here that officially biosphere reserves would be having economic development. But moving that aside, let's take a look at what is socio-culturally and environmentally sustainable, especially keeping in mind this case that I mentioned here in Germany, where, you know, the complexity is not just having pristine biodiversity in an area which was formerly a border, but also you have people living in it. And how do we ensure that this is actually socio-culturally sustainable? Foremost, we need to define social and cultural sustainability. So here is one definition that I found by a university in Sweden, where they defined social and cultural sustainability as the social and economic life today and in the future, fulfilling basic human needs, for example, self-provision, social justice, health, education, culture, religion, peace, human rights, balance in life and motivation as long-term processes that shape social conditions for future generations. And that is also one thing that came up during our interviews or interactions with people here. They feel like that the history, what happened during that time when this was still East Germany, is slowly being forgotten. And they are very much interested in really having that documented. And of course, for us who come from countries with a dark political past, we always say like, we should never forget. And we hope that this will never happen again. And that's also one thing that is being expressed by the communities here, that, in some cases they think like, oh, we have now the European Green Belt or the Green Belt, which was developed along the Iron Curtain, wherein you have the biodiversity, this again across the border, where you have the biodiversity thriving because this used to be a border. And then they would think like, okay, this green belt could be sort of a new wall, a new border for them. And we have to ensure that if we are taking on projects like this, that people are comfortable in these types of projects, and not forgetting that we have to honor their sense of place and have the culture of remembrance in the social cultural sustainability that we want to pursue in our designated areas. So, indigenous communities have free, prior, and informed consent. This is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Indigenous Rights. And so this enables indigenous communities to have agency in whatever projects that come to them. So ideally, that's the ideal case. However, if we think about just local communities who are not recognized as indigenous communities, we only have norms. So it's quite similar to the local communities here in Germany. We only have norms, and we don't have free, prior, and informed consent as enshrined in law, for example. And that gives us, a bit of a question. Okay, so how do we also ensure that local communities, as related also to how indigenous communities have FPIC or free, prior, or informed consent, could have this when projects are developed or being implemented? And we have to understand what sense of place and culture of remembrance is. So sense of place means that these are meanings of and attachment to a place held by an individual or a community, while the culture of remembrance, and if I'm not mistaken, this is specifically developed in Germany because of the Second World War, is the way in which a society deals with its past history. So again, this is how Berlin, how Germany looked like with the border between East and West. So if some of you have been to Berlin, of course, you will see now this monument being freely without any of these borders. So what can we learn from this that could also apply to other internationally designated areas? So this is an example of a biosphere reserve, but of course our other internationally designated areas, so the Ramsar site, the global geoparks, as well as the World Heritage Site. And we know, looking at the statutes as well as the convention texts themselves, that they are really for proper consultation with local communities and indigenous communities that are within the sites. However, from our case, at least from our experience in this couple of days, we see that there's still much work to be done. on how to translate what we like in paper to reality on the ground. And so I would suggest 3 guiding principles on how we can engage with communities. And these guiding principles with engaging first starts with credibility. And what is credibility? So we say like, okay, all of the information that we have, for example, should be coming from trusted sources, so believable sources, and authoritative. And sometimes, in this area, it could be contentious because, or if we talk about history, then again, whose perspective will it be coming from? And however, we can look about credibility by having maybe rigorous vetting of participants, or even having peer review, etc. But we know that this is not enough. So we also have to make sure that the process is legitimate, wherein we have an information producing process that is fair and that also takes into consideration different actors. So, you can have credible actors, say like local government officials who have been here since time immemorial. But if it's only the officials that we are going to consult, then that's only one type of perspective. So when we look at legitimacy, we would like to see that we have all actors with a whole broad spectrum of different values being involved. And last but not the least, we would also like to have salience, or having our information, our project being relevant to the public who will be affected by our project. So relevant is something that we have to make sure that, okay, this will not interfere at the bare minimum, with how the project works, and it will not interfere with their daily lives, for example. And again, here at the Elder Brandenburg River Landscape, I was just in a supermarket, and I was discussing with the cashier, and then she said like, "Oh, biosphere reserve." She said, "I'm not happy when we became a biosphere reserve." She said like, "Now it's not that clean anymore, etc." So we have to think about sentiments like this, like why are local people, we felt like they're not supporting the idea, and is it because we didn't think about salience? And in the next couple of slides, I'll give you some examples of how I put this into practice in a project in the Palawan Biosphere Reserve and working with indigenous communities. So one thing that I did was to specifically look at giant honeybees. So this is the species Apis dorsata, so which you find only in South and Southeast Asia. So honeybees, there are a lot of honeybees in different species of honeybees in the world, not just the European honeybee. And what we did was to rigorously train the local communities with the use of digital cameras as well as GPS. And so that's already the part where we say, okay, we try to have them have credible information. But also, we trusted them enough to leave this with them. Normally, like when you say participatory mapping, it's very seldom that you find researchers leaving the equipment and leaving the data collection to the local communities. Normally, they're just like tour guides for the researchers who are taking the GPS coordinates, etc. And so they were able to get quite accurate GPS coordinates, and this also enabled myself, and collaborators to connect this GPS data to the pollen content of wild honey. So the honey that we get from the giant honeybees. And these are just some of the families that we found. So when you identify the pollen in the wild honey, and interestingly, we see like the family Rhizoforaceae, which is of the family mangroves. And you can just imagine, this is a forest area. And so that's where they took the GPS coordinates. But when we identified the pollen content of the honey, like under the microscope, etc., we found that the honeybees also brought back pollen from mangrove areas, and that's along the coastline, right? And so we see here very interesting data in collaboration with local communities. And also in the end, for them, they say like, yes, we are going to train using the GPS because for us, this is important in the future to map the borders of our ancestral land. So these are just some of the things that we were able to do. And furthermore, we were able to also use the results for targeted rainforestation or reforestation using native species. And through some funding from an NGO here in Germany, we were able to have a community cash for work program where they planted 6,024 wildlings in 1.5 hectares. And this has also been rewarding because we also won the innovation prize from the Yale University International Society of Tropical Foresters. So yes, this type of engagement, which we call transdisciplinary engagement, is highly rewarding. But it's not just about the prizes. So here I also won another prize because of that. But it's not just about the prizes. It's also about winning the hearts of people who are really engaged there and who have been living there even before it was designated a biosphere reserve or a World Heritage Site. And that's foremost what we need to think about, that these people have been living there even before it has been designated. And we should also remember, going back to the Sustainable Development Goals, that there are 5 Ps enshrined in the preamble of Agenda 2030 or the Sustainable Development Goals. And these are all equally enshrined. So, of course, we already have the planet, prosperity, but we also have people, partnership, and peace. So at the end of the day, we have to ensure that all these 5 Ps are covered in the projects that we do. So again, people, not just ending poverty and hunger in all forms, but also ensuring dignity and equality, peace, fostering peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, partnership, implementing the Agenda 2030 or the Sustainable Development Goals through a solid global partnership, planet, protecting our planet's natural resources and climate for future generations, and lastly, prosperity, ensuring prosperous and fulfilling lives in harmony with nature. So as an ending quote, I would like to give you, I'm not sure if any of you know this philosopher. So this is Immanuel Kant. I guess in some circles it's not very well liked, but there's one something from his work that I really like, where he says that man, and generally any rational being, exists as an end in himself, not merely as a means to be arbitrarily used by this or that will, but in all his actions, whether they concern himself or other rational beings, must always be regarded at the same time as an end. So, let's always keep in mind that when engaging with local communities, not to use them as a means to an end, but rather see them as, here philosopher Kant was saying, always as an end. So thank you very much, and please stay tuned for our case studies, which I will introduce to you in a while.
네. Professor Matthias, thank you very much for your excellent and insightful speech. Now, I would be very grateful if you could take the floor once again to chair the following session, which will feature 3 case presentations and a panel discussion on today's topic. Professor Matthias, so you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. So. And thanks everyone again for joining today's online thematic seminar on management challenges of internationally designated areas. So I hope the presentations prepared today will be both inspiring and useful to you, and that they will prompt lots of thought. So we also welcome you to leave any comments or questions on today's topic through the Zoom chat during the seminar. And now I would like to ask Ms. Aline Salvadon, hopefully I pronounce your name correctly, to deliver a case presentation on management of IDAs and involvement of the local community in Luberon-Lure, UNESCO Global Geopark, and Biosphere Reserve of France. So I will just introduce shortly Ms. Salvadon, who is the coordinator of the Luberon-Lure UNESCO Global Geopark and Biosphere Reserve. She has worked for various public institutions, including the French National Forest Office and Cévennes National Park, on work which was all related to balancing productive use of forests with landscape and biodiversity preservation. So she's also currently the head of nature preservation for Luberon Regional Park, where she is helping local communities to manage nature conservation and sustainable development through agriculture and tourism. So please give a warm welcome to Ms. Aline.
Hi, everybody. I'm so nice to be with you today to share this UNESCO and Biosphere network with you. I'm going to share my screen with you in the first place. So can you see it? Everything is working. So thank you for the introduction, Denise. So I will start with the summary of my presentation. First, I want to present to you the Luberon area, and then the history of our different national and international designations. And then I would like to share with you 2 examples of 2 different projects, one linked to the Biosphere Reserve and one linked to the Geopark. And then I will talk to you about the practical challenges in coordinating the 2 designations in our area, and then finish with seems to us most natural connection between the 2 designations that are the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, and an example of how we use them to mobilize our inhabitants and local shareholders. So Luberon-Lure is located in the south of France, between the Alps mountain ridge and the Mediterranean Sea, as you can see on the map. So Luberon and Lure are in fact the name of 2 mountains. You can see them on the map. And our site is very wide because it's 2,450 square kilometers and almost 200,000 inhabitants. And those inhabitants are located in 100 local communities, mostly villages, but there is also 5 little towns. You can see also them on the map. So we have a very remarkable natural and cultural heritage. To start with, we have a very interesting geological area and a lot of paleontological sites with fossils that are very interesting to science. We also have a great natural heritage. You can read the figures I show you on this presentation. With we have 1/3 of the French plant species. Almost half of the French vertebrate species are located also in our area. You can see there a bat, for example. And we also conduct studies on insects and spiders, so to promote this rich biodiversity. But there is also a nice cultural heritage that goes back from prehistorical times, and that you can see on the landscape with hilltop villages and a lot of historical monuments. For example, this bridge you can see on the picture was built by the Roman 2,000 years ago. And we have also a rural and industrial heritage, and also intangible cultural heritage like Provençal language and a lot of masterpieces related to the artists and poets, and also, of course, the gastronomic French and Provençal cuisine, which is a part of our identity. So from the economic activities, there are two main activities, tourism and agriculture. And the main natural resources are the wood from the forest and also the natural pastures. And all these depend on water supply, which is a great deal. For example, this year we have a big drought and there is a lot of problem with water. So it's also a natural resources we have to take care. So now I'm going to show you just a brief history of the Luberon Regional Nature Park, which is a French designation, and it was founded in 1977. You can see on the map the little green sites. They are the park growing during the last decades. And so when you see in parallel this history of the Luberon Regional Park with the UNESCO designation, you can see that in 1997, the park asked UNESCO for the Biosphere Reserve designation. And then in 2010, we expanded the Biosphere Reserve to Luberon and the Lure mountain. And then in 2021, we had our periodic review. And so we are now designated for the next 10 years. But in parallel to that, we also became a member of the Global Geopark Network in 2004. And it was already under the auspice of UNESCO. But in 2015, we became like the other Global Geopark. We became UNESCO Global Geopark. So that means we have 3 designations. And you can see here the perimeters. They are different for Geopark and Biosphere Reserve. And the Biosphere Reserve is larger than the Geopark and the Natural Regional Park. So now for example of project, as you know, our action as a Manan Biosphere Reserve focuses on biodiversity and natural resources, also scientific knowledge and inhabitants mobilization. So as an example of that, I would like to share you our local forest charter, which took place for 12 years now. And it's a local forest policy to promote sustainable management of forest, as well, of course, as the use of forest resources for better understanding and protection of forest biodiversity, better protection against forest fires. With global warming, it's a big risk for our Mediterranean forests, and also to produce more renewable energy with wood. So one of action we made is to group private owners because 70% of the forest in the Luberon-Lure area are private. There are only 30% public owned by the state or the local communities. So to have sustainable management, you have to group private owners into associations for better management of the forest, because most of the time they own only a very small part of forest, like 2 or 3 hectares. So we have now 6 forest associations gathering 40 different owners and managing 6,000 hectares which is 10% of the private forest, which is, for us, it's a great achievement. As a geopark, our action focuses on, of course, geodiversity, geological heritage, and mainly geotourism. So it's quite different from the biosphere reserve, because the goal is to use the geodiversity to benefit to the local population through tourism. And one example of a concrete action is we created a network of 21 geo-partners who are people working in the tourism sector, like visitor centers or accommodation providers or professional guides. And we want them to discover the geological heritage so they can share it with the visitors and build a local economy on it. So this network will gather 47 people by the end of the year. And it's one of the main actions conducted by the Geopark. But as you can see, these two types of actions are quite different. And this addresses the challenges we have in coordinating the two designations. We have different site boundaries. We have different monitoring and reporting requirements from the state of France and also from UNESCO, different reporting timelines, which is complicated for the team here in the regional park. But also main issue like the lack of an effective legal framework in France for UNESCO designation that leads, of course, to a lack of specific funding for biosphere reserve and geopark management. The funding we have is mainly for the regional park and not for the UNESCO designations. And of course, different objectives and approaches for each designation. So that leads sometimes to a confusion among local communities and among the visitors, because the national designation as a natural park may eclipse the UNESCO designation. So that's a problem we had for several years now. And we try to have concrete actions like identity and logo in the first place. So we want to share the UNESCO logos with the visitors and inhabitants through road signs along the perimeter of our area. And also we made only one logo for both UNESCO designation in order to be more significant for the public, because most of the people, they know UNESCO, but they don't know the biosphere reserves or the geopark. Also, we try to create a link between our three designations through the SDGs. So now we are using them as reference in the three management plans of the geopark. We use them in the Biosphere Reserve Periodic Review this year. And they are also used as a reference in the Luberon Natural Regional Park project of charter for the next period from 2025 to 2040. So since 2019, we conduct meetings and information of the elected representative of the Luberon Regional Park and on the general public to let them know about the SDGs, because they are not very well known in France. And also for the general public, we made promotional material to help them know the SDGs and ask themselves what are they doing in their real life to change the world according to the SDGs. And the one project we made this year was completely for the both two designations, Geopark and UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, is the Sustainable Development Goals trophies. It's a competition to help project leaders to implement one or more than one sustainable development goal in our area. And everybody can participate, like town halls, communities, associations, group of citizens, schools, social centers, company, people in agriculture, for example. And we're gonna select the top 3 projects that will show a good adequation with the SDGs. And each one will receive €1,000, which is not a big amount of money, but that can help very small and local and very interesting projects. And also the winner will go to the ceremony in the UNESCO site in Paris and gather with other French biosphere reserve trophies, because we are not the only biosphere reserve in France to organize these trophies. But what we do this year is specific because we wanted to enhance the SDGs and to help people understand what they are and tell us how their project will be part of this big world goals of the SDGs. So that's it for me. Thank you for your attention, and I will be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Aline. So for those who have questions, please put it in the Zoom chat, and we will have all the questions later during the panel discussion. So also for those who are present in South Korea, I would like to request that you also course your questions to Ms. Sandy Choi. All right, thank you very much again, Aline. So our next case presenter is Dr. Neil Moores, who will speak about the management of IDAs and involvement of the local community in Yeoncheon Imjin River Biosphere Reserve and Hantangang UNESCO Global Geopark in the Republic of Korea. So Dr. Moores is the director of Birds Korea, which is an NGO, non-government organization in the Republic of Korea dedicated to the conservation of birds and their habitats in Korea and the wider Yellow Sea ecoregion. So he has worked in East Asia on the conservation of birds and wetlands since 1990, conducting research projects in several East Asian countries, including Japan, Republic of Korea, Vietnam, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So he's also an active member of the Threatened Waterfowl Specialist Group of the IUCN, that's the International Union for Conservation of Nature Species Survival Commission, and has conducted several projects as part of species task forces within the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership based in Incheon. Since 2020, he has been conducting research and proposing mitigation measures to reduce impacts on threatened species in Yeoncheon Imjin Biosphere Reserve in close cooperation with the local community. So he has been living in the Republic of Korea since 1998. He lives in Busan and is joining us in person, offline in Yeoncheon. So Dr. Moores, the floor is yours.
Thank you. 예, 새와 생물대 나얼모스 반갑습니다. I'm very happy to be here today, to be given the chance to talk about the Yeoncheon Imjin River Biosphere Reserve. As everyone knows, Yeoncheon County is one of the organizers of this meeting, so this has a lot of local relevance. The presentation takes the title, Making Peace with Nature. This, of course, is one of the lines of the Secretary General of the United Nations, who said that now we have a choice, collective action or collective suicide. I think the presentations so far in this meeting have been inspirational, very positive. I would like to take a bit more of a Greta Thunberg type approach and just say that with the climate crisis and with the ecological crisis, there is a real urgency to take biodiversity conservation seriously. And as said by the UN Executive Committee, current negative trends in biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation will undermine progress towards 80% of the assessed targets of the SDGs related to poverty, hunger, health, water, cities, climate, oceans, and land. Conservation of biodiversity, which is one of the core functions of core areas within biosphere reserves, is not just about protecting pretty species. It's really about maintaining the health of ecosystem for now and for future generations. So in this presentation, I want to introduce the Biosphere Reserve. I want to outline some of the conservation priorities that we've recommended to Yeoncheon County. As introduced, I don't work for the county, I'm an NGO. We have several small contracts with the county to help support them in their very important work with the Biosphere Reserve. And then to talk about the conservation response. And the conservation response includes building local capacity, growing technical capacity, and I think in the case of this Biosphere Reserve is creating appropriate spaces for local communities safely to engage with the river, to engage with the biosphere, to learn about the environment, to learn about the SDGs. The Biosphere Reserve. I think Yeoncheon County was really bold and courageous in designating the Biosphere Reserve. They did so because Yeoncheon County is on the border with the DPRK, very close to the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas. They did so because much of the area has been under military jurisdiction, and that jurisdiction will yield in the coming months and years, opening up much of the county to development pressures. And these development pressures are coming from Seoul and Incheon especially, one of the largest conurbations in the world, 30 million people, putting a huge amount of pressure on land for development and resource extraction. So the area Yeoncheon County designated covers almost the entire county. The three areas, the three zones, core, buffer, and transitional, has a total area of 58,412 hectares. Much of the Biosphere Reserve, the lowland areas, is quite densely populated, but some of the hillier areas are less populated, and much of the core area is what is called the civilian-controlled zone. This is the area that abuts onto the demilitarized zone that separates north and south. Identifying conservation priorities within this area. You'll see three numbers on the map. The area, the red, is the core area, is mostly the civilian-controlled zone, right next to the DMZ, where there's been restrictions on access and development for the last 70 years, and also along the Imjin River that flows out from the DPRK into the ROK, out into the Yellow Sea. Area 2 is the Hantan River. It's a rather smaller, faster flowing river. And Area 3 is largely low populated hill forest in the northeast of the county. Looking more closely at the habitats, as was explained in the wonderful keynote speech with the example from Germany, the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas is a very narrow strip of land that's been naturally rewilding for 7 decades now. And it's become one of the most important areas for biodiversity on the Korean Peninsula and in East Asia. And the civilian controlled zone, CZZ or CZZ, is in the south, adjuts to that area. Much of the land is arable. There are also relic wetlands, riparian wetlands, and the Imjin River flows through the CZZ out through the remainder of Yeoncheon County. It's really quite a lovely river. Within the CZZ especially, this area is globally important for populations of wintering cranes, red-crowned crane, turumi, white-naped crane, chair turumi. 30% of the flyaway population of turumi depend on the CZZ in Yeoncheon, 30%. And this is a species with really a strong cultural importance within East Asia, not just in Korea. Look upon a crane and live 100 years. It's a species that's found in art and poetry throughout the region. The cranes have been increasing in recent years within the CZZ in Yeoncheon. These are data gathered by a local activist, a wonderful person, Mr. Paek-sun Kwang. They've been increasing because of artificial feeding and also because so many other areas have become degraded through development projects. There are now very few places for these cranes left to live in. Within the CZZ and along the Imjin River too, there are quite extensive rice field areas. These are also internationally important as defined by the Ramsar Convention for species like Seikirogi, greater white-fronted goose, during migration. They're very important for globally threatened amphibians, Suwon chonkeguri, Suwon tree frog, also kumkegi, golden pond frog, and also for nationally threatened species such as tumbugi, watercock, and nangpidulgi hill pigeon. Our survey also found that the Imjin River is astonishingly important for the globally endangered scaly-sided merganser, Hosa biori. Now this might just look like a duck, but this duck is extremely rare. 3,000 in the world. It's confined to East Asia. It's a brilliant indicator of healthy river ecosystems. And during our surveys last year in November, we found 4% of the world population along just 20 kilometers of the Imjin River. This makes the Imjin River one of the most important sites in the world for this gorgeous East Asian species. Based on our research in Yeoncheon, but also in many other parts of the range, we know that Hosa biori, scaly-sided merganser, like quite wide rivers. And the reason for this is because they are extremely shy, very, very sensitive to disturbance from people. And this brings me, I think, to the main point that I would really like to emphasize. Of course, local communities are extremely important. Livelihoods are extremely important, of course. But when we talk about biodiversity, we have to understand the ecological requirements of these species are central to their survival. Economic possibilities, economic livelihoods are very important for human beings. But if the ecological requirements are not met for the species, they simply will go extinct. The reason for river width, as I say, is that the species is very sensitive to disturbance. People approach 250 meters and the birds stop feeding and fly and can fly up to 3 kilometers in one go. Because of the increasing pressure in many of the rivers in South Korea connect to Sadegang, the Four Rivers Project, but also recent developments of walkways and cycle routes along rivers. This species cannot use many rivers anymore. It's just too shy. So what we have been doing is suggesting to Yeoncheon County, we've made various proposals to really support them, because management of these sites is extremely challenging. It's not easy to do. People don't know about the species. They don't know why the birds are important in any way. So what we've done in one area, for example, is we're recommending, please close the walkways along the rivers during the time the mergansers are here. please put up signage explaining how sensitive the birds are to disturbance, where the birds come from, what they mean, the fact that they're breeding maybe on Paektusan, the sacred mountain, Paektu, that they share their habitat in summer with tigers, but they're here in Yeoncheon during their migrations. And also plant screening vegetation to reduce disturbance. We also looked, we've done a lot of surveys along the Hantan River. As I said, it's rather narrow, rather beautiful. Also many boardwalks along most of the river recently built, which means that we couldn't find any Hosabiuri along the Hantan River at all. But we did find good numbers of a species called long-billed plover, Hinmok multese, national vulnerable species, also riverine species that nests on shingle beds in the rivers. Also a species very sensitive to disturbance. In the forest areas, some areas we see have been naturally rewilding, if you like, over the last 7 decades, very beautiful forests full of life. Others were planted during reforestation during the 60s and 70s, a little less diverse, but still very important for water, etc. In the forests of Yeoncheon Biosphere Reserve, we found quite high concentrations of the species fairy pitta, Palsekcho, which is also globally vulnerable, an indicator of very diverse forest ecosystems. So these really rare birds are indicating the specialness of the habitat, but they also potentially can be the focus for ecotourism in the future. When we step back looking at the Biosphere Reserve in Yeoncheon, we realize it's actually part of a chain of sites all across the inner border area of Korea that are outstandingly important. In the central figure, you can see lines marked in red. These are internationally important sites in the DPRK. Lines in blue, internationally important sites in the ROK, and areas of green, which are the internationally important areas within the DMZ, internationally as defined by the Ramsar Convention. Because of the reduced disturbance compared to other parts of the Korean Peninsula, these areas are of extreme importance for biodiversity conservation now. But as many of us know, from next year, regulations about construction in CZZ will be eased. So there will be a lot more development pressures on these areas. So our work in Yeoncheon County, we actually started working with Yeoncheon County happily after Biosphere Reserve designation. We, in 2020, helped organize workshops on frog ladders to help amphibians escape out from concrete drains in rice fields with local people and people from around Gyeonggi. And in 2021, as well as conducting surveys, been holding workshops to introduce birdwatching and train up local people to start doing counts. So we now have several of our members who are new birders who are now doing their own survey work of the Hosabiuri, the scaly-sided merganser, and generating wonderful data. Earlier this year, we also brought, with Yeoncheon County, the EAFP, East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership, and Hans Seidel Foundation to Yeoncheon, and are trying to encourage the county to designate the Imjin River as a flyway network site under the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership. That's a Type 2 voluntary initiative from 2006 under the Summit on World Summit on Sustainable Development. The benefits of doing that is that it can enable Yeoncheon County to get supported technically from experts in other range countries, Far Eastern Russia, PR China, and DPRK, who can share their experience of conservation of Hosabiuri. It also allows this species, scaly-sided merganser Hosabiuri, to be a species for green diplomacy, a focus for discussion between nations, instead of talking about conflict, focusing on conservation instead. Sharing best practice for shared species in a shared world. And this brings to the final main part of this presentation. We feel, having invested a lot of time researching in Yeoncheon, that there needs to be an appropriate space where people can go and learn about the rivers, learn about conservation, learn about the SDGs. We've identified several places. This is just one of them. And it's just outside or the edge of the biggest town within the Biosphere Reserve, a town called Jongkok. The area at the moment is kind of a bit neglected. People walk through it, but they don't stop and engage with the river at all. What we would like to propose to the county is to construct a nature center in an area which is now a kind of, I guess, car park, with a design that is attractive, visual, interesting, grass roof, wooden, low impact on environment. We would want to have open areas that are now mowed, managed, to be allowed to revegetate, put birdwatching hides and other screens along the river so people can stop and look and see what's there. We would say, please, let's restore part of the river. There's an area called a park, but no one goes there. It's banked off with concrete. No one visits. So break the concrete, allow the river to reflow, allow the river to be restored, widen the river, maybe it becomes wide enough that scaly side and mergansers can use it. And this can then become a focus for restoration, to explain what restoration is, where you could examine water quality, etc. And importantly, there's an open space, just cut, create a proper place for environmental education. We heard a lovely presentation from Gochang yesterday, where they have a wetland center. In Suncheon, there are centers where people can go. There are not yet these places in Yeoncheon. If you could have a place with pond dipping, small ponds, structures for classrooms, outdoor classrooms, or places that family could go, then they could look at the river, learn about the river, understand the river, and begin to support conservation on a much more quickly, but with much more passion, because it's right in their neighborhood. So these are the kinds of proposals we're working on. I apologize for the speed of the presentation, and just leave you with that last figure of presentation of the Sustainable Development Goals as produced by the Stockholm Resilience Center. The writing is very small, but you see the biosphere is at the foundation of everything. The biosphere is the foundation of society and of economy. And if you can get the management of the biosphere right, then economic growth and social well-being will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neil Moores, for your interesting presentation. And so, last but not the least, we move on to our final case presenter today, Ms. Eugen Lee, from the rainforests of the Achinanaana World Heritage Site in Madagascar. So, Ms. Lee is an Associate Program Specialist at the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa, Antananarivo, and is involved in various different projects in the field of natural sciences. In particular, she is now in charge of the biodiversity conservation and sustainable natural resource management for integrated community development in national parks of Madagascar, also known as BIOCOM project. So before joining the Madagascar office, she worked as a researcher for the Korea Environment Institute, where she assisted with the Jeju Volcanic Island and Lava Tubes Comprehensive Plan, and was also a consultant at UNESCO Jakarta on designated sites. So welcome, Ms. Lee, the floor is yours.
Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It is our pleasure to share our strategies for promoting local community involvement within the Biocom project. This project is implemented by UNESCO Achinaana Reef in Madagascar and funded by Korea and National Cooperation Agency, or KOICA. To begin with, we will give you some brief information on the rainforest of the Achinanan, a World Natural Heritage Site in Madagascar, and how the Biocom project was initiated. And then we will explain our strategies to promote local community involvement within the Biocom project. Lastly, we will share our management challenges within the Biocom project, and we are open to listen to your suggestions. So the rainforest of the Achinanan is a serial property, which means 6 national parks comprise a World Natural Heritage Site like Jeju Volcanic Island and Lava Tubes in the Republic of Korea. Since the property maintains ongoing ecological processes necessary for Madagascar's unique biodiversity, the property was inscribed as a World Natural Heritage Site in 2007. However, only after 3 years since 2010, it has been listed as the World Heritage in Danger. As you can see the graph, anthropogenic activities such as land conversion, mining, illegal activities, fires, and subsistence hunting were identified and reported to threaten the property. Here, we share some pictures of local communities making fire inside the property to have some farmland and produce some charcoal for cooking. Illegal logging of precious wood species such as ebony and rosewood has been reported over years as well. Many of you in the seminar might find it hard to understand why such anthropogenic activities are prevalent in the World Natural Heritage Sites. However, more than 80% of Malagasy population live under $1.9 per day. So for them, natural resources around them are the easiest source to possess. Moreover, governance and enforcing laws are weak to prevent illegal activities in the property, which aggravates the outstanding universal values, or OUVs, in the World Heritage Site. Therefore, UNESCO launched a 4-year Biocom project to conserve the OUVs of the World Heritage property, as well as to safeguard the Montagne des Français protected area. These intervention sites were decided in consideration of the accessibility to the sites for better management and monitoring. To 40,000 people, mostly low-income inhabitants, are expected to be benefited from the Biocom project, and local partners as well as UNESCO implement this project. Moreover, the government authorities such as the Ministries of Environment, Education, and TVET support the project. As mentioned at the beginning, this project is funded by KOICA. Throughout the project, we expect to contribute to biodiversity conservation, sustainable means of livelihood, and awareness raising and capacity building on environmental protection and sustainable development in our intervention sites. Then how do we, UNESCO, promote local community involvement? This Biocom project is a Man and the Biosphere program in the natural science sector, and one of the main components of this project is ecological monitoring and inventorying the sites by scientific researchers. However, culture, education, and communication and information sectors have been closely collaborating on this project. And of course, local community involvement is a key to implementing the project. Therefore, UNESCO promotes intersectoral approaches to encourage local communities to engage and participate in the Biocom activities. For instance, since the project takes place in and around the World Natural Heritage Properties, activities to be taken must respect the OUVs as well as the cultural values of local communities. Therefore, several discussions with the communities before initiating the activities were essential. So now we will show you some of our activities with local community engagement and participation. To conserve biodiversity by improving the environmental conditions of protected areas, nurseries were built through the Biocon project. Local communities grow seedlings in the nurseries, and they plant seedlings in and around the intervention sites. They also monitor the growth of the trees. Our project also supports patrol and surveillance activities by park rangers, forest agents, gendarmeries, ministries, as well as local communities, which means that the local communities also participate in the joint patrol and surveillance activities. We said earlier that ecological monitoring and inventorying in the project site is conducted by scientific researchers. However, local communities also participate in ecological monitoring by counting the number of lemurs and plants and reporting to the Madagascar National Parks. They engage in this activity every month. As we covered in the beginning, preparing sustainable means of livelihood for the local communities and increasing their income is very essential to protect natural resources in Madagascar. Therefore, a number of income-generating activities are being carried out in each site. Around the Parc National de Marojej, fishing ponds were built by the project, and local communities grow fish fries of tilapia fingerlings. Also, we support apiculture and improved rice cultivation around Marojej. Around the Parc National de Andoael, coffee and vanilla trees, as well as cloves and rice seeds, were distributed, and local communities have planted the crops. Around the Montagne des Français protected area, we support apiculture, sheep and poultry breeding so that local communities can make a living. Biocon project also promotes ecotourism activities by building infrastructure and training women and youth for cooking and tour guiding. It is expected that the local communities who receive the training will also be more autonomous and independent from the excessive use of natural resources. As you understand, raising awareness and building capacity for environmental protection, natural resources governance, and sustainable development is also important to achieve the objectives of the Biocon project. Radio programs and educational materials which contain environmental education and sustainable development were developed and distributed for local communities and primary and secondary schools. From this, it is expected that the future generations would be a global citizen who respects the importance of the environment and designated sites. Moreover, strengthening partnership by stakeholder communication is very important to implement this project as well as have ownership among the stakeholders. Therefore, two committees, Steering Committee and Scientific and Technical Monitoring Committee, were established in the project accordingly. The Steering Committee is a decision-making body as well as the cross-team group that aims to ensure the proper functioning of the project, improve its monitoring, and guide strategic choices. There are representatives from all partners, including the ministries. The Scientific and Technical Monitoring Committee brings coherence to the project activities. They are lead partners of the Biocon project as well as local external partners. NECOM is also invited to attend the meetings. Before we end our presentation, we would like to share our 3 management challenges to implement this project. First, COVID-19 pandemic limited our activity implementation because there had been travel restrictions nationwide. Moreover, since the border was completely closed for almost 2 years, national revenue dropped significantly and unemployment rate has also increased. Second, climate change not only brings holdups of our project activities, but also hampers the sustainability of these activities. Moreover, it affects the biodiversity loss in our intervention sites. Third, as we all experience, commodity prices have been rising due to the current geopolitical tensions in the world. And Madagascar is in a more vulnerable situation because the basic infrastructure and social system is weak. For instance, there was a 44% increase in oil price last month in this country, and many regions suffer from energy shortage at the moment. To summarize, the local community environment in this Beacon project is key to conserve the OUVs of the World Heritage Property, as well as to safeguard Montagne de France's protected area. And intersectoral approaches could contribute to improving the management in these international designated areas and increasing local community engagement. And strengthening partnership by all stakeholder communication is also needed to support local community involvement. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eugene Lee. And so I have noted that we have questions already, and we are going to start our panel discussion. So I would like to invite Ms. Aline, Dr. Nial, Ms. Eugene Lee, as well as Dr. Julie Rakotoson, I hope I pronounced it correctly, of UNESCO Achinanaana Reef, who has been invited as additional panelist, as well as Dr. Miyeon Yu of the Yeoncheon Imjin River Biosphere Reserve to join us in the panel. So just a quick introduction of Dr. Julie. So she will follow up on the questions and comments received on Ms. Lee's presentations. She holds a doctoral degree in biology, conservation, and ecology from Madagascar. And she has also experience working as a researcher for the WWF in Madagascar studying bats. So she has also been a project manager at the Foundation for Protected Areas and Biodiversity of Madagascar, as well as a lecturer at the Department of Animal Biology at the University of Achinanaana in Madagascar, and as well as serving as coordinator of UNESCO in Madagascar. So please give a warm welcome to all of our panelists. And before we start with your questions, I would like to share with you the results of the survey on the Mentimeter that was earlier asked of everyone. So what are the challenges that you face when increasing the involvement of the local communities in IDAs, which is the theme of our workshop today? So we see that a lot of the challenges is with a lack of funding, followed by both lack of relevant policy and strategy and lack of awareness, communication barrier, as well as governmental regulations are also part of the main challenges. However, we see the top 3 are the lack of funding, lack of awareness, and lack of relevant policy and strategy. So thank you very much for your participation in our Mentimeter. So I will like to go now to the questions. So if I could ask Ms. Sunyoung Park. So I saw that you have a question earlier to Ms. Aline. So you have the option of taking the floor, or if you would like that I could also read out your question. And so the question is, do we have, the question to Ms. Aline is that, on the local authority to govern the 3 designated areas in your area, do you have separate authorities for each area, biosphere reserve, geopark, and regional park, or integrated one? If it is separated, how do they cooperate and coordinate the policy on the protected areas? So, yeah, Aline?
Yeah, there is only one local authority, which is the regional park. The regional park gathered 78 local villages and towns. So we are the only authority recognized by the UNESCO for both designation as a geopark and a biosphere reserve. So that also means that the main resources come from the natural regional park budget and human resources. And we, as employee of the regional park, we carry on most of the projects linked to the 2 designations.
Thank you, Aline. And then we see here a question from Banu. So Banu, you have the option to also take the floor. If not, and I also wanted to ask you to which doctor you are addressing your question to. So while we are waiting for your answer to that, I would like to go to Simin. So Simin, please take the floor.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm Simin Iskandar. Thank you for this useful seminar. Actually, I have a suggestion at the first and then 2 questions. May I? Thank you. I have different questions from, for example, Dr. Morris and Dr. Lee. That's my suggestion is that when a lecturer ends his or her lecture, we can ask questions because we confuse our question about 3 or 4 lecture about it. This. Thank you very much. And the first question is mine from Dr. Morris about river. Actually, I am PhD student at urban planning, and I work at DOE in Iran. One of our challenges for river is that personal ownership for local people around river. So it's tough to conserve that river. What's your may I have an do you guide me for that? Thank you very much. And the second question is from Dr. Lee about local people in Iran. Because of thoughts and because of other things, local people lost their traditional jobs. Dr. Lee said about tourism, cook food, and tour guide as a job for local people, but other traditional jobs such as livestock and fishing and agriculture has been lost because of modern era, because of modern industry. So would you guide me for that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simin. Okay, let's go to Dr. Morse.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, it's our understanding that there isn't a sense of personal ownership, and even beyond that, there's not even really much of a sense of connection for people living next to the river with that river. This is why what we're proposing to Yeoncheon County, they've been very receptive to our ideas, is to create these nodes along the rivers where tourists that are visiting as well as local residents can actually learn about these rivers and try to understand more about them. But I think this is a problem not only of rivers, I think it's a problem of many ecosystems in societies that are very industrialized. It becomes harder and harder for people to recognize their dependence on the ecosystem. I think much easier potentially with rice farmers and others whose livelihood absolutely depends on that ecosystem. I hope that answers the question. 고맙습니다. Thank you.
Thank you. And so let's go to Dr. Julie to answer on behalf of Ms. Eugene Lee. Hello.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you. I would like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to share our work on the field and organizing this seminar. So your question is, are the local communities involved in the reforestation activities, patrol, surveillance activities, and ecological monitoring compensated? Local communities are involved in all project activities. We have already discussed local communities' engagement and participation in our project. To give more number, for instance, in the patrol and surveillance activities, a local community must carry more than 7,000 man per day of a patrol in the park of Marutezi. In the park of National Andoael, local communities have to conduct more than around 5,000 man per day of patrol.
Thank you. I would like to go to Ms. Lee, Eugene Lee.
Yes, if I may add Julie's comment, I'm sorry that I couldn't join in the camera because there are some internet connection. And then, thank you for the questions from Iran. And then to summarize your question was that, I understand that from the in the local community in the heritage site, they have their traditional jobs, but through our intervention, their traditional jobs might be lost at the end. So that I think, that's how I understood about this question. And then actually, it's my opinion that actually, as you can see my presentation before, there are people are making fire, and then people for getting some charcoal for cooking, and then also getting some farmland for agriculture area. But as you can see, this is not sustainable, or this is also hampering the OUV as in the property. That's why we are promoting ecotourism jobs in the Biocon project, that people can work in the different sectors as well. And then also, as you can see, the agriculture and fishing or apiculture or other activities in the Biocon project, we are trying to engaging in more improved or more sustainable activities, so that they can still keep and appreciate their nature around, as not too much destroying this our heritage site. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. There is actually a follow-up question to you from the chat, wherein
يتكلمونا كلام هاي الحين
Er-
هذا الكلمة.
hold on, we have some noise. Okay, so let's go back to the question in the chat box from Eric Atakusi. For Ms. Lee, if you could explain further how you were able to get the local community members to participate in ecological monitoring activities. How do you incentivize or motivate them? And I guess also to Dr. Julie, if any of the two of you can answer.
May I?
Yes, please.
Thank you for this question, Dr. Eric. We expect that local communities' behavior and their vision to protect natural resources would be enhanced throughout this project, through our Biocom project. As shared in our presentation, improving the community's income also aims to make them autonomous so that they can finance conservation activities themselves. That one of our incentives to motivate local community around the protected areas. Moreover, we expect that this project could contribute to behavior change by producing and broadcasting educational radio programs in education for sustainable development and natural resources protection. Secondly, developing educational material and teaching method for primary and secondary school and including them in their curricula. When people around the park are very well educated, they will implement very easily all activities with the manager of the protected area. We also promote International Day, such as the World Environmental Day and a school trip to protect our goods. We do some awareness and we give them a training in the protected in the protection of nature. So to resume, the Biocom project also build infrastructure such as the school and the mini dam for agriculture, so that the local communities could sustain themselves after this project. All of this, this is a strategy to incentive and motivate local community around our protected area. Thank you.
Thank you, and Ms. Eugene Lee.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. And just to add Julie's comments, and then actually it's I just wanted to stress about the ecological monitoring activities that the local community also participate in. And then actually Julie already mentioned in the previous comments that the local communities are also involved in these monitoring activities, that they are holding their pens and notes, and that they are counting the numbers of lemurs or the numbers of plants in the national parks. And then and then they report to the MABAD and Madagascar National Parks regularly. And then, as Julie already mentioned in the previous comment, and then they also involve in the park control, patrol and surveillance activities that they also do that with joint patrol with other authorities or park rangers or gendarmeries or etc. Thank you.
Thank you. So another question to Dr. Moores from Banu Devi Gurdin. Hopefully I pronounce your name right. It has been observed that even though there might be government's commitment for sustainable development and protection and preservation of wetlands or biosphere reserves, the urge to create or improve developments and or infrastructures, some governments had to forego their goodwill for sustainable development and go ahead with developments not always in the interest of the protection of nature, and especially in small countries, whereby it is of utmost importance to create immediate economic development and ironically for sustainability of its population, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. So what would you recommend in these cases? So that's the question from Banu Devi Gordon.
Amazingly difficult question to give any kind of an answer to. I think it depends very much on the economic condition of the region that's under discussion. My own experience has in recent years has, say, included DPRK, North Korea, as well as ROK. Economically, socially, so very, very different. One of the more interesting aspects of working in the DPRK is to see how seriously their Ministry of Environment takes the Sustainable Development Goals. It was a real surprise to me. For them, when talking about, for example, wetland conservation, they see immediately, at least within that ministry, the conservation of wetlands is actually very good for the livelihoods of the local communities. They see that managing forests well is really good for reducing disaster risk, because there are many, many cases of these kind of bald mountains where whole villages get washed away in heavy rain events. Within ROK, much more economically powerful country, very rich country, very leading country in so many ways. I think an understanding of sustainability is still beyond the grasp of many. I think this is a common problem across the world, and I'm originally from the UK. The UK boasts about being an environmental leader, but it's going ahead with wanting to extract more oil and more gas to get over certain problems caused by geopolitical issues. So I think we have to be, as people who understand more about the profound meaning of the SDGs, we have to be very sympathetic to governments and decision makers. They are faced with appallingly difficult tasks, but it's very often they don't actually know, they don't understand. They see the words, but these words don't have a lot of meaning to them. And this is why I quoted or used the name Greta Thunberg, and actually used the word of the Secretary General of United Nations and of the Executive Committee. There is a huge body now of scientific evidence that says we have to take these issues much more seriously than we have been doing up to now. It's not a case of trading off our futures just for 1 or 2 years or 3 years. But it is an incredibly complex thing. Thank you very much for the question, because it gives me a chance, I think, to air a lot of grievances I think many of us in this field share. And from this whole process, this seminar, it's been really inspirational to hear how many good stories there are, really wonderful people working always against that background, right? So yeah, if you have the answer to your own question, please share with us. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions I will go first to those questions first from Paul Mokin and then to Tao Huang. And then we have some hands raised from those who already asked questions earlier. So let's give chances first to the others. So from Paul Mokin, with the impacts of climate change and novel development pressures increasing, for example, current global energy crisis bringing up the need to change policies and undertake different development in the past, how well are the panelists see their engagement with policy changes at the local and state level? For example, how well do the panelists see themselves connected and able to influence development and construction policies which might impact biodiversity? So I would like to first ask Aline. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so as Dr. Moves said, I think it's very difficult for us to bring those ideas and those goals for sustainable development into the general population. But in my area, most of the stakeholders and the elected people, representative people, they are not aware of these global issues, mainly because we are a regional park for 40 years now, and our new management plan is based on the SDGs and say that we have, for example, to slow down construction and urbanization in our area to protect agricultural land and also natural landscape, of course. But we can see this awareness increase, but it's not widely spread, and some stakeholders and elected people still want to build new neighbors or new industries or new roads, and it's difficult. But I think the fact that we have these two UNESCO designations, both as a biosphere reserve and geopark, maybe it can make some of them think, wow, maybe the world is watching what I'm doing. So it also helps people to be aware of the globalness of the issues, I think.
Thank you, Aline. So maybe I'll ask Julie next.
Thank you for this important question. Madagascar is a country very vulnerable in terms of climate change, and effectively people living around protected areas are the most impacted in terms of flooding, of cyclones. So what the government do in Madagascar is they try to do a lot of awareness to maintain the forest, because the forest is a fast barrier in terms of cyclone and a very strong wind. They try to reduce as more as I can deforestation. And now people living around the protected area, they are aware that this biodiversity is very important to reduce the impact of a strong event like a cyclone, flooding, and high temperature. But the main issue in Madagascar is the government. The government doesn't have enough fund to run activities around the protected area. So we have to, we remain on the end of the donor to do activities, and this is a big issue here. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I would like to address it to Dr. Mi-yeon Yu. So based on your experience as Biosphere Reserve Manager of Yeoncheon Imjin River, how well do you see yourself connected and able to influence development and construction policies which might affect biodiversity?
저희는 이제 생물권보전지역과 세계지질공원이 다중 지정되어 있습니다. 그래서 세계지질공원보다는 이제 생물권보전지역이 19년도에 먼저 지정이 되었고 20년도에 이제 세계지질공원이 인증이 되었는데요. 저희는 이제 통합 관리를 하기 위해서 관리기본계획을 수립하였고 그 첫 번째 단계로 연천군에서는 생태 전문가라고 해서 생물권 보전 지역을 담당하는 전문가를 채용을 했습니다. 그러니까 한국의 경우에는 주로 지방 정부 차원에서 많이 관리를 하고 있기 때문에 담당자가 기존에 업무를 하고 있는 공무원들에게 담당을 하고 시키고 있습니다. 다만 이 담당자들이 환경 관련된 분들이 많이 계시는데요. 환경에 대한 업무를 하면서 생물권 보전 지역에 대한 업무는 매우 적은 부분을 차지하고 있습니다. 그러다 보니 생물권 보전 지역에 대한 관리나 세계지질공원에 대한 관리가 조금 저조한 편인데요. 지질공원 같은 경우에 한국에서는 국가지질공원이라는 시스템이 있습니다. 그래서 국가지질공원은 자연공원법에 따라서 이제 지질 전문가를 채용하게 되어 있습니다. 그래서 지질 전문가들이 지질공원에는 이제 다 배치가 되어 있어서 지질공원을 운영하는 데는 조금 더 활성화가 되어 있는 반면 생물권 보전 지역은 그런 부분이 부재합니다. 근데 연천군에서 처음 사례로 이제 생물권 보전 지역 담당자를 채용했다는 점에 있어서 생물권 보전 지역 관리 기본 계획이 수립된 것을 실제 실현할 수 있다는 데 가장 큰 강점이 있는 것 같습니다.
Thank you, Dr. Mi-yeon Yu. So another question to Aline from Tao Huang. So my question for Ms. Aline is there any institution of coordination between Geopark, World Heritage, and Biodiversity in your area or UNESCO Global Geopark?
There is no specific institution, and that's maybe one of the fact that sorry, I do it again. So there is no specific institution, and everything is discussed inside the regional park institution. But we have different colleagues involved, different representatives involved in each designation. And what we are trying to do for 3 years now is to make all these people work together so that the project can benefit for both designations. When we try to work with communities outside the regional park, because, for example, for the Biosphere Reserve, there is 22 villages that are not in the regional park, but they are in the Biosphere Reserve. So we work with them without any specific institution, but we try to work concretely with them on each project and try to mobilize them and make them participate, for example, in the local forest charter for their own forests. But there is no, and maybe we are lacking this type of institution for representation of all the different stakeholders and communities. But it's very difficult because in the French regulations, we don't have any specific regulation for Biosphere Reserve. So it's difficult to create a new institution on the area.
Thank you, Aline. So let's go back to some questions again from Simin, and then followed by Sonyoung. You are still on mute, Simin.
Hello again. Thanks for this awesome seminar. It's very useful for me. I should explain about my question. For example, you suppose traditional jobs here are livestock grazing or fishing or agriculture, etc. Okay. Our environmentalists told them you should conserve, protect area, so you cannot grazing, you cannot, for example, agriculture in those lands. And the other hand, industries, modern industries, replaced their traditional jobs. And the other hand, import many kinds of products from another countries replaced their handicraft, local handicrafts. So all of them endangered their traditional jobs. So how can we solve this problem for local people? Besides of tourists, they cook food and tour guides, how can solve their traditional jobs? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simin. So I will go around and first ask Dr. Julie. So if you've experienced this, and how do you find solutions?
Thank you for your question. In Madagascar, we do not have industry to replace traditional job. So what we are doing here in Madagascar, we promote and we give some capacity building to people living around our protected area. For example, we give them some training to improve all the product, all the handcraft product around the protected area, so they can keep and improve all their handcraft. Thank you. Maybe Eugene, you would like to add more?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Julie, for your comments, and then thank you also thank you very much for your question, Simin. And then, as Julia already explained to you, and actually we live in a really different world, and then actually the economic or social, the status of in the world is very different, because for instance here in Madagascar the GDP per capita for last year was around $400-500 US dollars. So if I may share with the one that you asked within this Biocom project, and then maybe it's also linked to the question in the chat by Mr. Paul Mukin about the development development and construction policies which might impact biodiversity is actually in the Biocon project and in Madagascar. What you Simin and Paul said about the economic development construction, and then maybe is somehow different situations in Madagascar. And if I for Simin's question first, is that it's true that the local community. I understand your concern that the local communities might lose their current job or current lifestyle of living, that is really linked to their culture. Their culture as well. But at the same time, it's really difficult for us because for instance, in the rainforests of Achinanan, we have the property and then we have the buffer zone. The buffer zone is like 2 kilometers from the property, but they are already affecting and destroying the buffer zones, and then they are destroying the inside the property as well. And then that's why it's not really sustainable to conserve this OUV in the property. So that's why we are trying to promote the other way to do more, I would say, the sustainable way to in the ecotourism sector, or in other sectors as well. And then also we try to promote sustainable education for sustainable development in a sense, and then TVET as well. And then also for answering the Paul's question about the economic development and construction here, is that actually within the Biocon project, I'm just saying that within the Biocon project, the construction is not really the matter to danger this World Heritage property. It's more for the local community themselves are exerting, the burning fire, or doing illegal activities here. So I think the economic status here and the economic status from the participants in the to ask us some questions are a bit different that I would say. I hope I could, me and Julie could answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask Mi-Yun if you have any experience on this.
저희는 이제 지역 주민분들을 대상으로 교육 프로그램을 많이 운영을 해왔는데요. 사실 생물권보전지역 같은 경우에 과거 2012년도에 DMZ 전역을 환경부 주도로 생물권보전지역을 지정을 추진했었습니다. 하지만 이제 지역 주민분들의 반대가 극심했었는데요. 물론 연천군만 반대한 것이 아니고 이제 한국 남한 지역 쪽에 서에서 동쪽까지 모든 지역이 이제 지정 추진을 하다 보니까 생물권보전 지역에 대한 인식이 낮았던 주민들의 반대가 극심했습니다. 특히나 이제 DMZ 일원은 한국전쟁 이후에 군사시설 보호구역으로 많은 규제를 받아왔습니다. 그렇기 때문에 보전지역이라는 그 명칭으로 인해서 생물권보전지역이 지정되면 가뜩이나 경제개발도 할 수 없고 우리 삶의 질을 저하시켰던 그런 규제가 더 강화되는 것이 아니냐라는 이제 반대와 우려의 목소리가 많았었는데요. 그거를 해결하기 위해서 저희가 2013년도부터 주민교육 아카데미를 시작했습니다. 많은 지역 주민분들은 DMZ는 항상 접근할 수 없는 것이라고 생각을 했습니다. 실제로 접근하기가 매우 어렵고요. 그리고 그것이 가지는 가치에 대해서 많이 인정하지 않으셨고 그거를 많이 체감하지 못하셨습니다. 그래서 저희는 지역 자원 조사를 통해서 연천군과 DMZ에 어떠한 자원이 있는지를 파악을 하고 그걸 통해서 여러분들의 생계와 연결될 수 있다라는 교육 프로그램을 진행을 했습니다. 그래서 지역 주민분들이 지역 자원을 활용해서 새로운 커뮤니티 비즈니스 차원에서 소득 창출을 할 수 있도록 저희가 지원을 해드렸고요. 물론 3년간의 교육 프로그램만으로 실질적으로 모든 사업을 추진할 수는 없었습니다. 하지만 긍정적이게도 한 10개 업체 중에서 2개의 업체가 지금까지도 운영을 하고 있고요. 사실 저희가 오프라인 참가자분들을 대상으로 진행했던 오전에 현장 견학 프로그램 같은 경우에는 지역 주민들, 그 당시에 교육을 들으셨던 주민들로 구성된 구석구석 여행사에서 프로그램을 진행을 했습니다. 그 외에도 저희가 다양한 사업을 통해서 주민분들이 마을 여행사 차원에서 프로그램을 기획하고 계시고요. 세상이 변함에 따라서 마을분들, 지역 주민분들도 새로운 사업을 찾아서 이제 움직이고 계셔서 저희도 그거에 따라 사업을 지원을 하고 있습니다. 그리고 또 무엇보다 아까 초반에 신익님께서 지역 주민들이 주체성을 어떻게 갖게 할 것인가에 대해서 말씀을 해주셨었는데요. 그 부분에 대해서는 저희가 라포를 형성하는 것이 가장 중요하다고 생각합니다. 사실 지역 주민분들 입장에서는 저희가 외부인이기 때문에 저희가 하는 말에 대해서 크게 귀를 기울이시지 않습니다. 본인과 관계없다고 생각하고 이것이 왜 중요한지, 우리 삶이 훨씬 더 중요한데 왜 당신들은 자연을 보전하라고 이야기하는가라고 이야기하시는데요. 계속된 이제 접촉, 계속해서 지역 주민분들을 만나고 이야기를 하면서 라포 형성을 하다 보면 조금씩 주민분들의 마음도 변화하고 새롭게 사업을 추진할 수 있을 것이라고 생각합니다. 실제로 그런 일이 연천에서 일어나고 있고요. 물론 많은 시간이 필요하긴 합니다. 네. 감사합니다.
Thank you. So we have roughly 10 minutes left for our panel discussion. So I would like to go around with a final question coming from our participants, Hovensha Ganu, who asked, how are the youth engaged in all the activities of your respective IDAs? And then also later on, we'll also like to give the floor to Son Young Park. So if all of you, starting from Aline, could give a quick answer to how the youth are involved.
Sure. As for the children, we carry on a huge educational program within dozens of schools each year in our area, and so the children, they can learn about nature, biodiversity, geology, and also, of course, sustainable development. So that's an educational program. For the young adults, we hire each summer 20 local young people between 18 and 25 years old, and they are in the forest and in the natural areas to welcome visitors. And their main objective is to raise awareness about the risk of forest fires, because in summer it's a very, very dangerous situation, and more with global warming. So they spend 2 months to talk to visitors and also local inhabitants to help them prevent forest fire and to know what to do in case of a fire. So these people, they are local young people, and they have this opportunity to do a concrete and effective action, you know, to protect the nature and the biosphere of their area. And so they grow up to be responsible adults, I think. Last part of my answer, but it's still a project. We want to create a permanent youth forum with young people of our area, to give advice to the elected people and representative people of the regional park. As a council, we have a scientific council, and now we want to have a young people council too, so they can, share their objectives and goals and give advice to the elected people that most of the time they are not young in my country, so they are above 40. And so it's very important to hear the young people's voice.
Thank you. Let's move to Dr. Julie.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. So, in the case of Madagascar, we work very closely with the Ministry of Education, and we for youth, what we are doing, we are promoting some radio programs. And we build a school for for children too, because we know that when youth are very well educated, it is more easy to make some awareness, and there will be our how to say that. They will protect very easily the forest because they understand the importance of the forest. Do you know that in Madagascar, 60% of Malagasy people are considering as young, as youth. So the place of youth is huge in Madagascar. So if we would like to well protect our forest, we have to dedicate some fund, and we have to run a lot of activities around youth. So as I said, we have some environmental education program, EDD, and as we work very closely with the Ministry of Education, we are involved in the curricula. So we improve all the educational environmental program inside all school. That's what we are doing here in Madagascar to involve and promote youth.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I think Eugene would like to add some more.
Yes, thank you, Julie, and then thank you, Julie, and thank you for the question. And then, as Julie said, that if I add more, if I may add more within this Biocom project, as you already saw in our presentation slides, and we are promoting technical and vocational training, or TVET, for youth in ecotourism sectors, and then also, as Julie already mentioned, we are trying, within this Biocom project, we are trying to promote ESD, or education for sustainable development, related to natural resources conservation in this education system in Madagascar. So we are developing educational materials and methods with the Ministry of National Education, and then we are trying to put this in the primary and secondary school curricula. So the first grade and the fourth grade and the seventh grade of the education system here are selected as pilot, and then we are going to implement this curricula in the Malagasy education system. Thank you.
Thank you. And so the last minutes I would like to give to Ms. Son Young Park, who is in the floor in the workshop.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm Son Young Park, a local practitioner working in Suncheon Biosphere Reserve in South Korea. And my question goes to Dennis and Arlene. Actually, my question is very simple. What do you think about the governments more and more would like to use the material incentive or reward to mobilize local community participation? Because in Korea, many people more and more very busy, and it's very difficult to make a time to be engaged, even the designated area. So sometimes I also feel there's some temptation to use and to promote some material or development project which benefit to local people directly. What do you think about that? Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll answer shortly. So Aline first, and then I'll go after you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I get the question right, but I feel, yeah, it's a challenge to stay mobilized in this complex world and situation, and also with the speech of the governments are not really according to the budgets and the fund they are willing to give to nature conservation and local development. And for us, it's quite difficult to manage to keep the good spirit and mainly to work really with the inhabitants and really to know what they are willing to do with their also natural resources. Because in France, most of the time, the policy is top down, you know. So we have to adapt and manage to create projects that are bottom up, and it's quite difficult because it takes a lot of time, and in this difficult world, it's very difficult to find the time to create good projects.
Thank you. And so thank you very much, Son Young Park, for your question. And I think it's very interesting. And so just quickly, coming from a perspective here in Germany, so when we use someone else's time, we always see it as from the perspective of opportunity cost. So, you know, if they are left alone to use this time, what could they have otherwise done? So they would have done their livelihood on their own, they would have done their jobs on their own, and this would have corresponding income. So the material incentive could be seen as just replacing the income that they would have otherwise earned when in that time. So I don't really see it as negative, but when working with communities or in the Philippine context, for example, and engaging them in projects, I would just see that it is fair to compensate them for the time that they are giving to us to make our projects successful. So that's how I see this, not so much as an incentive, but just compensation for the time and the effort that they bring to join our project. So thank you very much, and for our very rich panel discussion. And thank you also to the participants for your very nice questions that also leave us a lot of food for thought for our future projects. So I would like to give back the floor to Ms. Yoon-suk Cho for our closing and for the group photo.
Thank you very much, Professor Matthias, for chairing the discussion session. And thank you to all the speakers and participants who have joined us today. It has been a very useful and fruitful discussion today as well. Dear all the participants, Now we have come to the end of the seminar. On behalf of the co-organizers of the 2022 Online Thematic Seminar on Management Challenges of Internationally Designated Areas, I would like to thank you all once again for your full and active participation during the last 3 days. To commemorate this meaningful event once again, I would like to suggest taking a group photo together at the last memory. We would be grateful if all the participants could turn on their cameras so that their faces show on the Zoom screen, and we'll then take a picture of the screen. Are you ready? Now we'll shoot on 3. Okay, so I'm just waiting. So the participants turn on the cameras. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. Okay, please waving your hands and have a big smile and to commemorate today's. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much for your kind cooperation. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you are. I hope we can all meet in person soon once the pandemic allows. In the meantime, once again, thank you very much for your enthusiastic participation in today's session. Thank you and see you again. 감사합니다. Take care of yourself, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. 감사합니다.